Hello, second grade families. My name is Heather Allegrezza, and I am the local reading specialist, also known as the reading coach, for Pinson Elementary School. And today I want to explain your child's beginning of the year reading assessment, also known as mClass. mClass measures how students are performing on important reading skills. These are the skills necessary for being a successful reader. In second grade, the assessment measures the following skills: nonsense word fluency, words read correctly, oral reading fluency, and comprehension. That piece of the assessment is called the maze. Let's begin by talking about the scoring. So on your child's report, you may see different colors. So let's talk about what the different colors mean. And it's easy to think if you think of a traffic light, and we'll think about this blue color as way up high in the sky. If you see a blue circle or blue squares on your child's report, in that area, your child is above benchmark, way up high. They're performing above grade level on that skill when they took the beginning of the year assessment. So that's a great place to be. If you see green circles or green squares, that means your child is performing at grade level, and so they should be good to go for the year. They did pretty well on their beginning of the year assessment. If you see yellow, just like a traffic light, if you see a yellow circle or square, we're going to slow down and figure out what's going on with that child, because that means they are below benchmark and they are not quite meeting grade level expectations. And this student may need some extra support in the classroom to reach their reading goals. If you see reds, that's a full stop. That's well below benchmark. And that means that a child is significantly behind the grade level on that particular skill or area. This student will need extra support at school and also some support at home to reach their reading goals. Let's look at a sample report so we can start to understand how to read it. Here we have a sample report for a second grader. Now, what's really great about our reading assessment, our mClass assessment, is it can show us students' testing over time. So if your student started in Jefferson County in kindergarten, we will be able to see all of their kindergarten scores under this column that says kindergarten. If your student was here for first grade, we'll be able to see all their scores for first grade. If they didn't attend school in Jefferson County, these areas will not show up, and that's okay as well, but they are helpful to us as teachers to see where your child is growing and where they're struggling. But for the sake of today, we're going to be looking at the column that says grade 2. And on your report, it'll say 2024 through 2025 because that's this year, school year. And you'll see 3 columns in the second grade area. You'll see BOY, that stands for beginning of the year. You'll see MOY, that stands for middle of the year. That's the assessment that will be given in December or January, and you will receive those results when they come out, and when you get them, there'll be scores in this MOY column. And then EOY stands for end of the year. So at the end of the year, again, you will get a copy of this report, but at that time, you'll also see scores in this column for end of year, EOY. Now let's go over here to the left and look at the different components on our report. So first we have our composite score. That's their overall score. So the test makers have looked at all of these things and the scores they made in these different areas, and they've come up with an overall score. So I'm going to look at composite, their overall score, and I'm going to slide over here to second grade, BOY, and I can see the goal for all students was 329. That was the score we're hoping for. This particular student scored 331, and you see that it's green, so that means good to go. Don't worry, we're good to go. Now, the next one is letter names. You see that this is empty and it also says NA. That's because second graders are not tested on this particular skill, but it still shows up because you might have a reason to want to look back at how they scored in kindergarten or first on this skill, because you can see there are scores for the kindergarten and first grade students, but you won't see one in here, and that's okay. Phonemic awareness, that's a skill that's tested in kindergarten and first, but we get over to second grade, not tested. Next is letter sounds. Do our students know the sounds the letters make? That's really important for reading success. I'm going to slide over here to beginning of the year second grade. The goal for second grade students to be on grade level was 50. Now in this sample report, this child scored 53, so they're green. They're good to go. They know their letter sounds, and they're at a good starting point. I'm going to look at this area as the next one, decoding. And we'll talk about all of these in more detail in just a moment. But in decoding, we can see the goal was 15. And this student scored 15, so they are green, good to go in that particular area at this time. Next, I'm going to go to the next skill, word reading, and I'm going to slide across till I get to second grade. I can see the goal was 26. Oh, but this student got 21, so that's a little bit below. So this may be an area that needs some of our attention and maybe a little extra instruction to pull that up to their on grade level. Next, we have reading accuracy. The goal was 92%. The student scored 93%, and they are in the green zone. That's great. Reading fluency, the goal was 49, and this student scored 56, so they scored a little bit above the goal, and they are still in that green zone. They are good to go. And then the last component that is not given until second grade, so you won't see any scores in these grades, is called the maze, and it's testing comprehension. The goal was 5, and this student scored 0, and they're in the red zone. So if we just look at this student for the year, we notice they have a lot of green, which is great, but we notice they were yellow in word reading, so we're going to give that some attention and dive into that and figure out what's wrong. And then on this comprehension, this maze, we're going to look at that and see if we can figure out how to support the student in those areas and pull them all the way along. A couple of other things I want you to notice. We will look right here at letter sounds. I want you to notice that the goal for the beginning of the year was 50, but by the time we get to middle of the year, it's 68, and by the end of the year, it's 76. So our goal is always increasing as they're being exposed to new learning and new skills. The expectation is going to go up for our students. I also want you to notice on this sample student, when this student started in kindergarten, they were red. They had some red squares. They continued to be red in their overall score and continued. But at the school, we're giving them that extra support. And at home, parents are giving extra support. And gradually, over time, we have been able to move this student into benchmark area. So that just because a student is red doesn't mean they can't achieve. It means they're going to need support, and we are going to have to work together as a team to get them where they need to be. So we never give up. We use this as a diagnostic tool to help us know what we need to do to help our students. So let's dig into some of those specific areas. So the first thing we're going to look at is phonics. And phonics is a student's ability to understand how sounds relate to the written letters and words, and putting those sounds and letters together to read words. And so here are two places that give us a good indication of a student's phonics skills. So On your report, you're going to see, we're going to be using an assessment called Nonsense Word Fluency. You're going to see a place where it says NWF, that stands for Nonsense Word Fluency, CLS, correct letter sounds. And then you'll see the words correct letter sounds. We'll talk about that in just a second. You'll also see the next component is NWF, Nonsense Word Fluency, WRC, words recoded correctly. And then you'll see the word decoding. So let's talk about this. A student, this is an example of what the student might be given. They'll be given 1 minute to complete this assessment, and they'll be given a list of what we call nonsense words. These are not real words, but they are really helpful to us to see if students are using their phonics skills, their letters and sounds, to read words without memorizing. So that's why we use some nonsense words, so we know they haven't memorized these from reading, looking at them over and over again. These are because they're not words they're going to see all the time. So a student's going to try to sound out the word nup, teg, nem, tib, some. And you'll even see as we go down, they get a little harder. Here's one with 4 letters, sark. And here's another one, term, dern, cham. All of these are nonsense words, but they help us assess whether students know the correct letter sounds that the letters make, and if they can decode, can they read the words correctly. So back to what our goals were. For correct letter sounds, the expectation is that they can get 50 letter sounds in 1 minute. And for decoding, for reading these words, the expectation is that they can read 15 of these words in 1 minute. So that's how those two scores come about. Next, we have word reading fluency, and on your assessment page, it's marked as WRF. And these words tend to be more like sight words or words with spelling patterns that a typical second grader should know. And the goal for this test is to read 26 words in 1 minute. So they'll be given a paper much like this, and they'll start at the beginning and they'll have a minute and they'll see how many of these words they can read in a minute. If they don't know a word, they can skip it and go to the next one. And our hope is that they'll get 26 words. Next, we have the oral reading fluency assessment. So this is an example of an assessment you might see on a mClass assessment. And oral reading fluency refers to your child's ability to read their text accurately, so get the words correct, and also read them at an appropriate speed. And when second graders take the test, this is one of the first pieces they are given. And if they do really well on this, sometimes it will exempt them from those other reading tests we just talked about, the one with the sight words or the one with the nonsense words. Sometimes they'll be exempt if they do well on their text reading. So they'll have 1 minute, and on this part they will measure their reading accuracy. So you'll see on your report a place that says reading accuracy, and that is where it measures the percentage of words they read correctly. So just like when you're reading, the more words you read correctly, the better you're going to understand. So that's the purpose of measuring that. We want them to understand what they're reading. The other thing it's going to measure is how many words they can read in a minute. So the goal for a beginning of the year second grader is to read 92% of whatever they read correctly, and that they can get 49 words in a minute. And the last assessment that you will see on your report is called the maze. And so here we're going to be testing comprehension. Do they understand what they're reading? And so this is an example of how that might be tested. So here's a practice passage, and you can see it has some sentences, and then in the second sentence it has a box with 3 different words. The student will have to read the passage, and as they get to those boxes with the 3 words, they'll have to pick the word that best fits the story. So for instance, in this practice passage, Tom goes to a school far from his house. Every morning he takes a school, art, bus, work to go to school, and they have to choose the word that makes the most sense. So they would choose every morning he takes a school bus, because that's the word that makes the most sense to go to school. In the afternoon, library, or morning, he also takes a bus home. So they would say in the afternoon, he also takes a bus home. So this is helping us measure if they're comprehending what they're reading. And they are supposed to score a 5 on this. So back to our sample report. Remember, letter naming, that's not tested in second grading. Phonemic awareness, not tested. They're going to start with an oral reading passage. If they do really, really well on this, you may not see a score for some of these others. And that just means they did well enough they didn't take those pieces. But there's letter sounds. Goals 50, got 53. Decoding, which is reading words, the goal is 15. Those are those nonsense words. Word reading, which is more like our sight words, the goal is 26. We've got our reading accuracy and our reading fluency we just talked about, and the maze. So that's just a quick overview of how to understand your child's report. But I hope if you have any questions that you will please contact your child's teacher, and they can sit down with you and walk through what's going on with your student. If you see blues or greens, those are areas we're not concerned about at this time. If you see boxes with reds or yellows like these, that's where we're going to need some practice, and that can be where your teacher can talk to you about what you might could do at home to help your student. Thank you so very much for taking the time to listen to this, and hopefully it will help you understand what your child needs and what is going well. Thank you so much.